The AFC North is routinely one of the best divisions in football, and 2024 will be no different. The Ravens are coming off of a year in which they went to the AFC Championship game while having an MVP quarterback in Lamar Jackson, and the Browns and Steelers were both playoff teams. Unfortunately, Cincinnati caught the injury bug and their season was derailed midway through the year, but they are more than expected to be back, and nobody would be surprised if the Bengals go to their third AFC Championship game in 4 years. In today's video, we're going to break down why the AFC North is going to be so brutal in 2024 and why it will be hell to compete in this division. I think you can make a legit case that any of the 4 teams can win the division this year, and I know some people may roll their eyes at the thought of the Steelers winning the division, but they won 10 games last year and improved in a big way this offseason, which doesn't apply to just the quarterback position, by the way. This division is always interesting and always fun to watch, and without further ado, let's dive right in. We are starting today's video with the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens had a very good 2023 season as they would go on to finish 13-4 and finish 4th in offensive points per game and 1st in defensive points allowed per game. Now, as we know, they lost linebacker Patrick Queen in free agency to the Pittsburgh Steelers and safety Geno Stone to the Bengals, and this was a common theme in the 2024 free agency period. Not just players from the AFC North going to different teams, but players going from one division rival to another across the NFL, and Saquon going to the Eagles is another example. Baltimore also lost pass rusher Jadeveon Clowney to the Panthers in free agency, and former defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald is now the Seahawks head coach. They also lost a few position coaches as they became defensive coordinators elsewhere, and despite all of this, the Ravens will more than be fine this year. There is still a tremendous amount of talent on this roster, and their new defensive coordinator is Zach Orr, and if that name sounds familiar, he was actually a second-team All-Pro linebacker for the Ravens back in 2016 at just 24 years old before retiring in 2017. Now, whether it's Justin Madubuike along the defensive line, Roquan Smith in the middle of the defense, or Kyle Hamilton in the secondary, I would be very surprised if the Ravens don't finish in the top 5 or 6 defenses in points allowed per game this year. Not just because they're a talented unit, of course, which they are, and by the way, I absolutely loved the selections of corners Nate Wiggins and TJ Tampa in the draft, especially for where they selected them, but an underrated part of having a good defense is playing good complementary football. What we mean by that, of course, is having the offense be able to handle its business and be able to take time off the clock and give the defense a rest when needed. And the 2024 Ravens will be very good at that, as they also signed running back Derrick Henry this offseason. Now, the Ravens' rushing numbers are naturally going to be skewed because of having Lamar Jackson as their quarterback. And no, that's not a running back joke as much as it is to say a team with Matt Stafford at quarterback is not going to run as much as a team with Lamar does. And there will be games for the Ravens during the 24 season where Lamar and Derrick each have 15 carries and are pounding the rock down teams' throats, and they're not going to be able to do anything about it. In turn, the defense will be rested and ready to go out on the field and take care of business. And due to all of this, the 2024 Ravens are not going to be an easy team to beat. And when you look at their losses from last year, not including the Week 18 game against the Steelers in a game backup Tyler Huntley started, all of them were preventable. They committed 2 turnovers against the Colts, they committed 3 against the Steelers, and they committed 2 against the Browns. You can argue that this team was a few plays away from being a 15 or 16 win team last year, which, granted, you can make an argument for a few plays for every team every single year, but they also did this without Mark Andrews for more than half the year. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Ravens win 12 plus games for the second consecutive season, and if they run the ball more than 6 times in a playoff game, and if there's no throw into triple coverage, well, I'll put it like this: the sky is the limit for the 2024 Ravens. Next up is the Cleveland Browns, and despite an up and down 2023 season, Cleveland won 11 games and made the playoffs. Now, one thing that I want to hammer home with the Browns, and when we do the 2024 team previews, which will be during the months of July and August, that will continue to be hammered home, especially with the Browns, is they won 11 games last year while being extremely injured. Their two starting tackles during the Texans playoff game were James Hudson and Jerron Christian, and this was after several tackles went down throughout the year, and not just on one side of the line, but both. Veteran Jack Conklin suffered a torn ACL in Week 1 of the 2023 season, which forced 4th-round DeJuan Jones into action, and even after the 2023 draft concluded, I thought the Browns had one of the biggest steals in the class in Jones, and he played very well for a 4th-round rookie tackle before he was placed on injured reserve with a knee injury. I wasn't surprised when the Browns lost to the Texans in the wildcard round, just because of how long of a season it had been for them, whether it was the offensive line injuries, or of course the Nick Chubb injury that occurred in Week 2 against the Steelers, which we will obviously not show, and even though it was a huge loss to the Texans, I wasn't really disappointed either, because you can very easily make a case that it was huge for Cleveland just to be there in the first place, and it was. But heading into 2024, the expectations should be high for Cleveland. A lot of their success will ride on the shoulders of Deshaun Watson, and we all know that heading into the year, but the supporting cast he has is pretty good. He has Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore as his top 3 receivers, and while none of those guys are amongst the elite of elite wide receivers, they can get the job done and get open, which is half the job in itself. I also really like their wide receivers 4 through 6 in Cedric Tillman, David Bell, and Jamari Thrash, and I really like Cleveland's receiving core top to bottom. We all hope Nick Chubb can get back to being the guy he was pre-injury, but what's also good for Chubb is he will be running behind a good offensive line when healthy, and like we said with the Ravens, Cleveland will be able to play complementary football. I can't emphasize enough how much I love the Browns defense, and if this defense stays healthy this year, or at least most of it, they will without a doubt be one of the best defenses in all of football. They are an absolute unit defensively, and that of course starts with Myles Garrett. They finished 13th in points allowed per game last year, but what has to be remembered about the 2023 Browns was, for as fun as the Joe Flacco run was at the end of the year, and it was fun, they turned the ball over a lot, and Cleveland had 37 turnovers as an offense in 2023, which was the worst in the league. Inevitably, that set up the defense in bad positions at times, and if Cleveland is even league average this year in turnovers, they will be a very difficult team to beat, and of course, if they can stay healthy. I really think Cleveland is a dark horse contender heading into the 2024 season, but as we know, a lot of it is going to rely on Deshaun Watson. This defense, like Baltimore, has playmakers at every level in Myles Garrett, JOK, and Denzel in the secondary, and Cleveland will be a very difficult team to beat every single Sunday. Staying in the state of Ohio, we go to Cincinnati to discuss the Bengals. Despite everything that happened with Cincy in 2023, most notably Joe Burrow sustaining a season-ending injury and T. Higgins missing time as well, the Bengals still finished with a 9-8 record, and Trey Hendrickson had 17.5 sacks. Jamar Chase also had a 100 reception season, and every team in the AFC North finished with a record above 500. I also really liked what Cincinnati did in the 2024 draft by bringing in Amarius Mims, Chris Jenkins, and Jermaine Burton with their top 3 picks. I also really liked the Jermaine Burton pick, and I think he will be a solid wide receiver 3 in his rookie year, and if in fact T. Higgins gets traded after the 2024 season, which is something we've been hearing about for quite a while now with T. Higgins, then I think the Bengals will have their second wide receiver on a rookie scale contract for the next 3 years. I also really like Andrei Yosevich, who is a later round pick in the 2023 draft for Cincinnati. Now, Amarius Mims is a very good offensive tackle prospect, and I liked him a lot, not just because he was a good offensive tackle prospect, but I liked him going to Cincinnati specifically because most offensive tackles are bigger than 99% of human beings, and when you toss out a height and weight and say, this guy is 6'5", 320, or this guy like Amarius is 6'7", 6'8", 340, There's a big difference in the NFL world between 6'5", 320 and 6'8", 350, 6'8", 360. And the Bengals also have two mammoths of offensive tackles on their roster in Trent Brown and Orlando Brown Jr., who will not only play and be the starting tackles initially, but they will also help out Amarius Mims develop as he gets more and more accustomed to the NFL. Now, obviously the Bengals had an injury-riddled 2023 season, but they improved their roster on a team that already went 9-8 last year, and a team that very easily could go to the Super Bowl and, hell, for all we know, win the Super Bowl this year. I really liked what the Bengals did this offseason, and they will absolutely be Super Bowl contenders heading into 2024, and they play a tremendous part as to why the AFC North will be hell this year. One other side note that I know Bengals fans are absolutely aware of entering the year is we are entering a point where Joe Burrow is a little underrated. People want to just say he's injury prone, he's not going to win the Super Bowl because he missed his chance and everything along those lines, but we're now entering a point where Joe Burrow is here as a player and people want to bring him down to here because he missed games with a wrist injury or because he tore his ACL back in 2020, but I think Joe Burrow and company will remind them exactly who the Cincinnati Bengals are this year. To the Steel City to discuss the Steelers, and every year the Steelers are one of the weirdest teams in all of football. They'll lose by double digits to the Cardinals at home, then beat the Ravens, then lose to the Patriots, then beat the Bills in Buffalo, and you get the point. We all know about how Mike Tomlin has never had a season under 500, and while it will be tough to maintain for the Steelers in 2024, I would be kind of surprised if they didn't get at least 9 wins this year for a few reasons. There were times during the 2023 season where the Steelers' offense was outright bad. Whether Kenny or Mitch was a quarterback didn't matter. They were awful at times. And I know people have varying opinions on Russell Wilson, and I get it, but I would be surprised if Russ isn't a big upgrade to the Steelers' offense in 2024. Remember, the Steelers' offense finished 28th in points per game offensively last year and had just 13 passing touchdowns as a team in all of 2023, and believe it or not, I think Russ can do that in 2024, and I think he can surpass that number by quite a bit. I also think the Steelers' run game will be improved from 23 to 24, as they had a really good draft and heavily invested into their offensive line. But as we know with Pittsburgh Steelers football, as they say in Western Pennsylvania, their defense is going to be critical to their 2024 success. And this team finished 6th in points per game allowed in 2023, and what I think is particularly key about this heading into 2024 that is not being discussed a whole lot is they finished 8th in turnovers forced last year, as they forced 27 turnovers, and that was with former All-Pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick missing 7 games. Minkah has been a first-team All-Pro 3 times during his tenure with the Steelers, and 2023 was the first year where he did not have an interception, and they still fared well without him. I know Bengals fans, especially with their receiving core, will look at George Pickens and Roman Wilson and Van Jefferson and quickly note how their receiving core isn't close to theirs, and it's not, but every year when late December rolls around and as we turn the calendar, Pittsburgh finds themselves in the playoff conversation, and I expect this year to be no different. The Steelers in particular have an absolutely brutal end of their season, as 6 of their final 8 games are division games, with the other 2 being in Philly in Week 15 and home against Kansas City on Christmas Day, but if I had to guess, I don't think Mike Tomlin would want it any other way. The AFC North is almost always one of the most entertaining divisions in all of football, and whether it's due to Mr. Unlimited, or the Steelers using Justin Fields in a goal line package, or any other way they choose to this year, the Steelers are going to be a very fun team to watch in 2024. I personally don't think they'll win the division, but the defenses in the AFC North are going to be incredibly fun to watch this year, and hell, how Arthur Smith utilizes the Steelers' offense will be too. Whoever comes out on top of this division will more than be battle-tested entering the playoffs, because this division will be absolute hell just to get through. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 35% of people watching are subscribed and helps the channel tremendously. Please check out the Football Analysis Podcast for more content, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.